CineManiacs. So, which is the best Fast and Furious movie? Almost 10 movies and a couple of spin offs later, it is really hard to determine which is the best film. Each film has its own flair, its own sense of, identity in the grand scheme of things, but there's one movie that will probably stick out to be one of the best films in the entire franchise, or probably the best film of the entire franchise. A film that represents the Fast series for everything that it is. Hold on to your seats as I might tell you about what do I feel about which is the best film in the entire franchise, and I'll divide this video into at least 2 to 3 different parts or even more, depending upon how I want to put my points forward. So without any further delays guys, let's go for a little ride. So, which is the best one? Without a doubt, it's got to be the first Fast and Furious movie. The first Fast and Furious movie is an apt combination of everything that the Fast and Furious franchise stands for. Wild action, cool characters, cool costumes, cool settings, brilliantly fashioned cars that are actually the center of the entire franchise at the moment. This movie was the one that began it all. It has everything that can take you, on a wild spin. Brian's test run with the Eclipse at the Dodger Stadium is one of the best sequences in the whole movie, period. The way the characters talk, the interactions among them feel so human and so relatable that even after all these years, this is the movie that sticks out as a very, cool image of the Fast and Furious for me. I have divided this video into a couple of sections where I talk about why I like this movie so much. So let's go back to the mean streets of 2001 and find out why. The cars of the Fast and Furious are by far the most amazing and most flashiest cars in the entire franchise. This movie has given us some of the best and the most iconic looking cars ever made. Brian's Supra, Brian's Eclipse, Dom's RX-7, Mia's Integra, Vince's Maxima, Leon's R33. They are some of the best cars in the entire franchise. That entire first race sequence between Danny, Ja Rule, Brian and Dom is by far the most defining sequence in the entire film. This is the sequence that sort of defines Fast and Furious for us. The idea that you're behind a car at 200 miles an hour and you simply don't look back and you press a button of NOS and you start winning races, that's the coolest thing ever, man, no question. Now this particularly is a very weird reason in my opinion, because I generally never thought I would like the Fast and the Furious also because of its costumes. The costumes of the Fast and the Furious are by far the most coolest costumes I've ever seen in a 2000s movie. All the characters wear clothes that are very relatable and very hip to actually look at. Anybody can just have a black shirt and a black pant and start looking like Brian. Anybody can wear a white shirt and a black pant and start looking like Dom. Anybody can just wear a couple of shorts and have a skirt and high length boots and you can start looking like Letty. You can just wear a 3/4 or let's say just some sort of a vest and have a jeans and you can look like Vince. That's how cool the fashion sense in this movie is. Sure, it looks a little street smart and it looks very rough and tough on the surface, but somehow they are actually street thugs and their fashion sense is going to be very iconoclastic as compared to anybody that you see in a movie. For a long time I have not seen a movie that has such a very cool and such a very distinct fashion sense that adds a new flair and some sort of a new vibe to the characters. Each and every character in this movie has their own unique fashion sense. Brian's fashion sense is by far the most coolest in the entire franchise. I mean, this guy has been wearing such cool clothes according to the movie that you'll be surprised to know that in Too Fast Too Furious his clothes were the coolest in the entire cast. Believe me, the coolest. And on many occasions I've even tried to replicate his fashion sense and Dom's fashion sense because of how relatable and how well they look like. For some reason I sort of feel that the Fast and the Furious has the best costumes in the entire franchise, and even the sense of fashion that they introduced with this movie got carried forward to the next couple of movies as well, particularly in Fast and Furious 5 and 6 and whatnot, because the way Dom used to have his white shirt and black pant and a black pair of shoes, that sort of also went into the other movies. That's how impactful it was to me. The stunts and the action sequences. Fast and Furious movies have actually got outlandish over the years because of the kind of weird stunts they've had in their entire screenplay, but the first Fast and Furious movie has pretty much grounded stunts and pretty much grounded action as well. Most of the combat scenes that you see in the movie with hand-to-hand action in them, they were all improvised. They were mostly improvised by the gang, and the way how they interact with the dialogues and all the kind of cool action taking place with the hijacking sequences and stuff, that is still by far the most amazing in the entire franchise. I mean, I have never seen a movie franchise having such grounded action to begin with. Most of the action is very, you know, realistic, or at least very slick and cool to begin with. That entire Johnny Tran chase sequence is a testament of how cool action sequences can actually look like. I mean, look at the whole idea of Johnny Tran and Lance chasing Brian across, you know, the Michelle Torena street, and then you have Dom Peepin who throws off Lance from the road, and then there is Brian who's essentially throwing himself and firing bullets to Johnny Tran. He kills him, and then there is this train jumping sequence. By God, that is one of the best highlights in the entire movie. You know, two cars speeding at more than 200 miles an hour, they suddenly jump in front of a train and they survive it. And don't try it in real life, because none of us will survive that ordeal. That's how strange it is, but yeah, you know, who cares? The movie had some of the best action sequences in the entire franchise, and there's no way we can actually go back and ever change that. This movie had the coolest action in the entire franchise. So what are my final thoughts on this movie? I mean, The Fast and the Furious has its own flaws. It has some of the most, you know, bizarre kind of car sequences for a car guy, but nonetheless this movie has held up to be one of the most amazing adrenaline fueled car action films I've ever seen in a very long time. Brian and Dom's chemistry, Brian and Mia's chemistry, the entire gang's interactions with each other, the dialogues, the cars of this movie, the action sequences, the amount of suspense and the amount of thrill that the movie had inside it, the tonality, the seriousness of the movie is something that has never been paralleled in the entire franchise up to this date. This was the movie that sort of established the franchise for us in ways, but we can never deny the idea that this movie sort of had the coolest and by far the best setup of all the elements that none of the movies in the franchise could actually have. I mean, there was an unpopular opinion on the internet about how Vin Diesel essentially wanted The Fast and the Furious to be just one movie, and he was against the idea of this film being a franchise. Imagine what different things could have been if The Fast and the Furious was never a franchise. This movie would have turned out to be a cult classic, a legendary film. And even if they had to make sequels, they would have made them more like street racing movies, and that would have made the Fast and the Furious movies even more cooler. Of course, that wouldn't have gone into the outlandish 1 billion territory that the movies have gone into right now. But nonetheless, The Fast and the Furious is definitely the best movie in the entire franchise, and it is the representation, the epitome of everything that the Fast and Furious talks about. You know, fast cars, hot women, cool races, outlandish stunts, you know, brilliant dialogues, their sense of family. That is just everything that the franchise is to me. Thank you so much guys for watching this video. Keep buying physical media, stay safe, bye bye, take care and bye con Dios.